I miss the simplicity of childhood. Does anyone else agree with that? You miss the simplicity of childhood. I miss being able to wake up and have to worry about literally nothing but what time my friends were going to get together. Like riding bikes all the time and really not having to worry about things like bills and cooking and laundry and housework other than like the chores that you would have to do on a weekly basis. But by pretty much just the nature of childhood, I miss that simplicity. Especially though, when it comes to money. Because I remember as a kid, you know money is a thing, right? Like your parents, they spend it and they buy you stuff and you like the fact that you have stuff, but like the actual amount doesn't really matter to you. You have no real way of conceiving what value things have when it's connected to their price tag. That's all kind of a foreign concept when you're a kid. I can remember when I was a kid, and this is probably common for all of us. You get any kind of money. It doesn't matter if it's, a dollar bill or a group of pennies. You feel like the richest person on the block. Like I can remember one time my neighbor across the street, we were really good friends growing up. I lived on a dead-end street where we had a bunch of kids and we would just pretty much wreak havoc on the street because, there weren't a lot of traffic and this was a different time and you didn't really care about your kids. And I remember my neighbor across the street, his name was Kyle, he had a birthday. And it was like a family get-together at his house, but because, us kids were always together doing stuff together, we just ended up at their family birthday party. And I remember oh no, I don't have a gift. I don't have anything to give my friend, and it's his birthday, so I went home and I found all the pennies that I had in my possession. It turned into, probably it was a ton of pennies, like maybe 20 cents worth of pennies, like a lot of pennies. And I remember I bundled them all together and I tied them into this pouch and I gave it to him as a birthday present. 20 cents, and it was a hit. It was probably the best gift he had received that birthday, I'm sure of it. I mean, yeah, I know he got a new bike, and yeah, I know he got video games and things, but no, it was these 20 cents worth of pennies. That was the gift because it was cash money, and as a kid, that's what matters. My daughter is now hitting that age where she's starting to lose her teeth. So the tooth fairy has to, give my daughter, money for every lost tooth. And I feel bad for the tooth fairy because when I was a kid, it was like quarters. That tooth fairy, the inflation has hit the tooth fairy hard. So if you can pray for the tooth fairy needs your prayers. It's like $5 a tooth now. It's getting hefty. We're going to have to take out, the tooth fairy is going to take out a second mortgage just to pay for these teeth. So she's getting this money. She's lost, I think, 3 or 4 teeth. And every time she gets money from the tooth fairy, she instantly has to spend it. She has no concept of let's save it for something. If we just wait and lose 5 teeth, we'll have real money. We can actually go and buy something you actually want, like a toy or you name it. We can actually do something. But the second she gets it, it's candy and ice cream and bribing her brother to do things. Or, when I say no to something, it's well, I'll pay for it. And she hands me a $5 bill. And it's well, you wanted to go to Disney World. So I'm not quite sure this will get us very far. But I miss that. I miss that simplicity, where if you have a piece of paper in your hand that has a number on it and some president, some dead dude's face, you feel invincible. You feel like you're on top of the world, that you could do whatever you want to do because you have money. This morning, we're going to be continuing our series through the book of Ecclesiastes. So far over the course of this series, we've been looking at how Kohelet, this teacher, throughout the book has been kind of looking for meaning and looking for purpose. He's trying to figure out this thing that we call life. And so far, he's come up empty time and time again. All these places that he's looking for meaning, he has decided is meaningless. It is vanity. A better way to look at that, if you were to directly translate the word for meaningless or vanity, this word called hevel, is to think about it like vapor or smoke. It is temporary and it is fleeting. It is an enigma. You can't hold on to it. It might look like it's solid. It might look like it can sustain you and provide these things, but really once you get close, it vanishes. And so far, we've looked at a couple different examples of this. We've talked about pleasure as a way that so many of us can try and find meaning, but in the end, it is hevel. We've talked about work and our identities and how our status matters to us in such a profound way, but yet, Kohelet has found that it is meaningless, it is vapor, it is fleeting. And then last week, we continued to have this conversation, And we talked about self-reliance. How for so many of us, we like to be self-reliant and on our own, and we don't need help from anybody, and we can try and find some meaning in that, and yet it is hevel. It is meaningless. It is vapor. And so this morning, we're going to continue to look at another example of that, but before we get into that, we need to have a little bit of a history lesson. So if you get bored of history things, you can, take a nap, I guess, and I'll call you back when it's time. But we need to understand the historical context of what is going on here in Ecclesiastes to really uncover what I believe Kohelet is trying to get at with what we're going to be looking at this morning. So the general gist of it is that we talked a little bit ago, maybe 2 weeks ago, how historically speaking, we have kind of thought that Solomon is the author of Ecclesiastes. But I kind of called into question because modern scholarship has begun to kind of test that, and they've really challenged that preconceived idea. And they kind of list a couple reasons as to why it's probably not Solomon that wrote this book. A lot of it has to do with the language that's used. It's a language that was much later in history than when Solomon would have been alive. He also doesn't really write in the exact same style that Solomon traditionally would write in. There's a couple weird things that happen throughout the book of Ecclesiastes that are not written in any of Solomon's other books. So modern scholarship has kind of come to the conclusion that more than likely, this is a later written document. And you might be asking, why that matters? I mean, the words are the same. Why does it matter that it's written later or earlier? Today, what we're going to be looking at is something that I don't think Solomon would really have had a whole lot of experience dealing with. And we're going to kind of unpack what exactly that means, because really when you look at this week's passage, it seems like the author is beginning to shed light onto something that happened around 300 to 200 BC, hundreds of years after Solomon was even alive. So for those of you that are history buffs, you might know a little bit about Alexander the Great. You probably heard that name before. Alexander the Great, he goes on, he conquers everywhere, and then he dies in the year 323 BC. And what happens after Alexander the Great dies is it fractures his massive kingdom, because realistically, there's no way that was not going to happen when you have somebody as powerful as Alexander, and he dies. All of his generals, all of his leaders go and they fight for that territory, and it shatters into a bunch of mini pieces. And these mini pieces just end up fighting each other to try and get more and more land. Here's a map of the area that we really have interest in this morning. We can throw that up on the screen. One of the dynasties that came out of Alexander the Great was the Ptolemaic Dynasty, which really took up headquarters in Egypt. King Ptolemy the first kind of had this mission to make Egypt great again, and really the way he would go about doing that would be to increase the taxes and tax the junk out of every single person that he ruled over. And that's important for us because, as you'll see on this map, Jerusalem falls under Ptolemy's jurisdiction. He controls this entire area, including Egypt, and he would tax heavily Jerusalem in the process. Sometime in the mid-200 BC time frame, there was a high priest by the name of Onias. Onias did not like being under the rule of Ptolemy. So he comes up with this plan where he's going to not pay taxes anymore, and he's going to instead start funding the neighbors to the north, a different dynasty, and they are going to hopefully destroy the Ptolemies because they were kind of enemies at the time. Well, Ptolemy finds out, and he does not like that very much, so there's a lot of death threats and a lot of really hefty consequences that are levied towards Onias. And that's where a key figure in this time period comes into play. His name is Joseph Tobias. Joseph Tobias was the nephew of Onias, and he would go on to try and pacify the King Ptolemy and try and get it back on their good side and prevent this big massacre that was being threatened. Now, one thing you need to know about how these kings would get their taxes is they would appoint certain people as tax farmers. Tax farmers were some of the most important people in the Ptolemaic dynasty. They were closest to the king, and it was their job to rule different regions of this kingdom and to get as much taxes as humanly possible from the people living there. And they would do it by any means necessary. If they could get more money out of you by sacrificing your kid to make sure you are serious and pay, otherwise your other kids would die, they would do that. They would randomly just start taking possessions, and they would put people into massive debt to pay the taxes that was due to them out of fear of death. These tax farmers were ruthless. Well, because this Joseph Tobias got involved in this whole tax dispute, he became the new tax farmer of Jerusalem. And what had begun as the people's champion of Jerusalem, he was the one who came in and stopped the massacre. He quickly turned on all of the people in Jerusalem and doubled the tax rates and forced more and more and more people into poverty to pay these massive taxes. So when we read this morning's passage, I want you to think through that, because it is what I believe that Kohelet, as he's writing this almost as a way of addressing this barbaric and ruthless tax system that the King Ptolemy has placed on the Israelites as a whole. So with that in mind, why don't we flip over to Ecclesiastes chapter 5. We're going to pick things up in verse 8. Verse 8. Don't be surprised if you see a poor person being oppressed by the powerful, and if justice is being miscarried throughout the land. For every official is under orders from higher up, and matters of justice get lost in red tape and bureaucracy. Even the king milks the land for its own profits. So here's we start. We have Kohelet, and he's talking about the mistreatment of the poor. And he kind of gives this message of, hey, you know what? Don't be surprised when those above you mistreat you, especially when money is involved. And the word that's used here kind of gives this connotation where it's supposed to be kind of the shock and awe type of response. Like when you see this injustice going on, your reaction shouldn't be, oh, I can't believe they're doing that, because Kohelet's observation is, of course they're doing that. They've always done that, and they will continue to always do that. That's the way the world works. And if you look at human history, that has always been the case. Those in power tend to abuse those underneath them. The wealthy tend to make it harder for the poor. It's a common way of doing life. And Kohelet here is saying you shouldn't be overly shocked by that. Evil people will do evil things. That is the way the world works. And you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's kind of a bleak way of thinking about the world. Why is that the way this works? Let's keep reading, because I think Kohelet will kind of dive into the core of why that is. Picking it back up in verse 10. Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless, how hevel, how temporary, how fleeting to think that wealth brings true happiness. The more you have, the more people come to help you spend it. So, what good is wealth, except perhaps to watch it slip through your fingers? People who work hard sleep well, whether they eat little or much, but the rich seldom get a good night's sleep. There is another serious problem that I have seen under the sun. Hoarding riches harms the saver. Money is put into risky investments that turn sour, and everything is lost. In the end, there is nothing left to pass to one's children. We all come to the end of our lives as naked and empty-handed as the day we were born. We can't take our riches with us. And this, too, is a very serious problem. People leave this world no better off than when they came. All their hard work is for nothing, like working for the wind. Throughout their lives, they live under a cloud, frustrated, discouraged, and angry. Kohelet moves from talking about those in poverty, those who are being oppressed, those who are reaping the injustices of the world, to talking about those who are subjecting those to that. In a sense, what you kind of hear in throughout these chapters is really what is going on here in Jerusalem in about the mid-200 BC time frame. You can see how Joseph Tobias is oppressing his own people, how he's out there amassing more and more and more. It's not enough just to take the normal amount of taxes. We need to up it and double it because I need more and more and more. And that is meaningless. We have this tendency, I think, as human beings to try and get as much as we can, but the problem is once you start to get, you find that it just creates an appetite for more. Wealth never fully satisfies. The reality is we will never have enough. I mean, look at the richest people in the world. Even though they have no reason to have the money that they have, they still are striving for more, to amass even more wealth. It is a never-ending pit. And he talks about it here, and he uses this idea where he talks about, when you have all of this, you just have people who come around you to help you spend it. Maybe he's referring to the taxes here. The more money you make, the more they're going to tax. Like if you've got Joseph Tobias increasing the taxes, doubling it, the people that's going to hurt the most are the people with the most money, because that is more and more and more money that's going to be taken from them. More of their possessions are subjected to this tax system where they can just randomly show up and take and take and take. Maybe he's talking about things like staff here, apprentices, people who come along and help steward your possessions, because the more you have, the more help you need to maintain your wealth. So maybe it's something like that. For us, though, I think that this means something a little different for us. Because the reality is very few of us have stewards that come and help maintain our things. Like we might have financial investors who kind of do that for us. And yeah, I know we all pay taxes, and no one here is really happy about paying taxes. It's never something we enjoy doing. That's a thing. And I get all of that. But one of the things I really feel our culture does is the more that you have, the more money you have, the more expendable income that you have, even maybe not expendable, but advertisers step in time and time again to tell you exactly what to spend your money on. Oh, you have money? That means you should probably buy this newest phone that costs way more than it should. You should probably get a brand new computer. You should probably get a brand new TV. You should probably go out and buy the newest car, because if you want to be successful, you will have all of these things. You can't really be successful without the newest iPhone. You can't really be successful if you're driving a 30-year-old car. You can't be successful if you don't have a big screen television and a really comfortable couch to sit on. You can't be successful if you're living in squalor. You should probably go ahead and spend all of your money on all of these newest and bestest technology. That's how you find happiness. You should spend your money on name brand clothing and go out of your way to look the part. Even though we have things that work. This is something that almost got me earlier this summer. So I saw an advertisement for a brand new grill, and I'm like, I need that grill. It wasn't cheap, but it wasn't outrageously expensive. The problem is I have a perfectly good grill at home, and it works fine. There's nothing wrong with it, literally nothing wrong with this grill, but I was dead set, I have to buy this new grill. Now, thankfully, I didn't buy the grill because I really would have been a waste of money, but we get stuck in these habits where even though we have things that work perfectly, we want something else. We covet the thing that we don't have. And what you find here is Kohelet, he's talking about that type of mindset, and what he's trying to help us understand is that mindset leads us nowhere. That oftentimes when you amass these types of things, this wealth or all these possessions or you name it, oftentimes what ends up happening is we just sit there and we watch it. We look at it, and we try and come up with ways for it not to disappear on us. So as you read through this, you have to ask yourself, is there a better way? Is there a better way to do this than to sit there and watch these things that we have and just hope that they don't disappear on us, to try and work tirelessly to protect the wealth that we have while we continue to try and get further and further ahead? Let's keep reading, picking it back up in verse 18. Even so, I have noticed one thing, at least that is good. And if you're really reading this and you're tracking along, it's like, finally. Like, it's been a pretty bleak message so far, right? Like, if you have stuff, that's not like the right way to handle things. Finally, he's getting to something good and positive, so that's a good thing. It is good for people to eat, drink, and enjoy their work under the sun during the short life God has given them, and to accept their lot in life. And it is a good thing to receive wealth from God and the good health to enjoy it. To enjoy your work and accept your lot in life, this is indeed a gift from God. God keeps such people so busy enjoying what they have, enjoying life, that they take no time to brood over the past. Kohelet's advice here, as he begins to wrap all of this up, is to look at the things that you have and to enjoy it. We have if you count them, the fourth time this phrase, eat, drink, and enjoy, has come up throughout the book so far. This is what we often refer to as like the carpe diem statements throughout the book of Ecclesiastes. And if you've seen, the movie, what's that movie? Robin Williams. Dead Poets Society, thank you. If you've seen Dead Poets Society, that phrase is repeated throughout that movie to kind of give these high school students this outlook on life, to just enjoy all that life has to offer. This is the fourth time that phrase has come up in this book. And I think what he's trying to help us understand is that as people who are created in the image of God, we can view all that this life gives us as a gift from our Creator. Whether it be our wealth or our poverty, we can understand that we are given what we're given because of Him. And it frees us. It frees us from this obsession to make as much as we can to find our meaning and purpose in that. One of the things I remembered as I was working throughout this sermon this week is an old episode of the TV show Friends. Is anyone here a fan of the TV show Friends? Yeah. It's an old show, so if you're young, you can watch it later. So in this episode of Friends that I was reminded of, you have this situation where you've got, these 6 friends, and 3 of them are making good money, and 3 of them are not making any money at all, because, they're actors and waitresses, and yet things are just not going well for them in this point in their life. And throughout this episode, various things keep coming up. It starts off with, one of the friends is about to have a birthday, so they decide, the well-off friends decide they're going to buy this big, elaborate birthday present to go see Hootie and the Blowfish, which, for those of you that are young, that was a band in the 90s. That was a lot of fun. You can look them up later. So they want to go and see this band and buy these tickets for this big bash for their friend, which was really expensive. So the 3, not financially stable friends, they kind of begrudgingly say yes. They'll sacrifice what they need to sacrifice to go to this concert. A little bit later in the episode, one of the other friends that was financially well off gets a promotion. So they have to celebrate this promotion. So they go off to this really, really, really expensive and fancy restaurant, and the 3 not financially stable friends, they go and they order the smallest things on the menu, like a side salad and a soup and this little appetizer pizza. And at the end of the meal, it was already really expensive for those little things, but one of the financially stable friends decides they're just going to split the check evenly amongst everybody. So that little side salad was like $33. So that didn't make them very happy, and this argument ends up ensuing, where they say, look, man, you are well off and we are not. And really what this episode has helped me to understand is so often in this life, we do this thing where we look to our wealth. We look to our financial standings as I have to live this certain line to be viewed right. And if we don't really hit that line, we do this thing where we just kind of pretend. We don't want to admit where we're at, so we just pretend to have all the money and all the things and live up to this certain thing, because if we are not there, if I can't go to these fancy restaurants or Hootie and the Blowfish concerts, what will people think of me now? So we pretend, and we lie through our teeth to try and give this persona of ourselves to the world. But what Kohelet is talking about here is to embrace where we're at. Whether you're financially stable, whether you're trying to figure things out as you go, it's all going to be okay. You can embrace where you're at. You don't need to subscribe to this lie that our culture tells us that you need to have this many dollars in your bank account to be successful. Your annual paycheck should have this many zeros and commas for you to be successful. You can live a happy life without all of that. I also see here, when you read between the lines, this call to be generous. Because when we live free of that temptation to amass and to hoard and to have all of the zeros and all of those things, we begin to realize that everything that we have is a gift from God. All of our money, all of our possessions, all of our time, all of it is a gift from God. So we can use those things. We can give those things up and give those things back. And we can be generous with what we have. We can look for opportunities to help those in need and to join in what God is doing in the world. Because one of the ways that we can partner with God and what He's doing here on this earth as He furthers His kingdom is through our money and our possessions and our time. We can partner with God because it's not ours to begin with. It was a gift given to us by God. And oftentimes when you hear, messages like this in churches, it instantly becomes, how much? How much am I supposed to give? How much am I supposed to freely give, maybe to the church or missionaries or other organizations? Like, how much? And oftentimes it all circles back to, the 10% number. You're supposed to give 10% of your paycheck. I oftentimes wonder, whenever I hear messages like that, how much that number is hurting generosity. Because here's the problem when you put a number on it. It becomes an obligation. It becomes an issue of, exactly how much do I make? Is the 10% pre-tax or after tax? I want to make sure I'm doing this right. So, which one is it? Is it 10% total, or is it 10% to one place, and if I want to give somewhere else that's above and beyond, or can I just add up the 14 places I give to and make sure all of that equals 10%? I think one of the problems with that mindset is it restricts the way we view giving. And it becomes an obligation and something that we are forced and coerced into doing. One of the things I find really interesting is that 10% figure is found nowhere in the New Testament. You can look, and you can call me if I'm wrong, and I might be. I'm wrong a lot. You can ask my family. I'm wrong all the time. But I've never seen 10% anywhere in the New Testament. What I do find is passages like this in 2 Corinthians. Second Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 7. Remember this: a farmer who plants only a few seeds will get a small crop, but the one who plants generously will get a generous crop. You must each decide in your heart how much to give, and don't give reluctantly or in response to pressure, for God loves a person who gives cheerfully. Do you see the difference? God isn't after a 10% of what you make. It's heart. He's after somebody who gives not because they're being coerced into it, not because they're being told to do it because, the pastor decided to have a sermon on that topic today. He is wanting to have people who see needs and they meet needs. They give because this is what we're expected to do, because all that we have is a gift from the Father anyway. So I think as people who are working to accomplish great things for the kingdom of God, I think one of the important things for us to keep in mind is whether or not we're viewing these things like wealth and possessions in the proper light. Is that our safety net? Or is it a gift from God that we are therefore able to bless the world with? What would it look like for us to embrace generosity? Even if you have little, even if you have a lot, it doesn't really matter. It's not about a dollar amount. It's about a state of mind and living. So let's be generous. Let's pray. Lord, we thank you. We thank you for the blessings that you've given us. We thank you that you have chosen us to bless, that we can have the things that we have and we can have the money we have, because we work, but because you have loved us and you are blessing us as we toil and as we work and as we enjoy this life. Lord, I pray as we live in your kingdom that we look for those opportunities to partner with what you're doing. Help us to partner with what you're doing, maybe through our time or our possessions or our money. Help us to partner with the things that you're doing so we can further this kingdom forward. Lord, turn to me, pray. Amen.